So hello everyone. Today we'll be talking about what's the buzz in London. The inspiration for this presentation basically comes from a volume of the Lucifer collection entitled What's the Buzz, which is a compilation of all the reports of activities of the Theosophical Society from around the world, published in Lucifer magazine during the years Blavatsky was the editor. That was from September of 1887 to around August of 1891. Even though she passed away in May, we published in the Lucifer collection in the volume What's the Buzz, all the material up to August of 1891, because all this, for 3 months, they were dedicating all the volumes of the magazine to Madame Blavatsky. We have also a second volume of What's the Buzz underway, which will comprise of a report of all activities, all theosophical activities, all work done by the Theosophical Society from August of 1891 until August of 1897, when the magazine Lucifer is stopped to be published. These are very large volumes. Each one of them, it's almost 600 pages. And it's possible to see in them how the Theosophical Society developed and expanded at a very fast pace. For instance, in September of 1887, there are only 5 entries on theosophical work, while in August of 1891, there are 18 entries. So some of the events featured in Lucifer are the Theosophical Society's convention of 1887, that counted with the participation of around 300 delegates, the American Convention organized in Chicago, the second annual ad interim convention of the Pacific Coast branches, and so on. However, in this presentation, we will focus on what is the buzz in London, on what was happening in London at the time when Madame Blavatsky started publishing the magazine Lucifer. And in all this material, we find also very interesting quote, which actually was not featured in Lucifer, but it's a very important quote showing the importance that early theosophists, they were giving to libraries and to archives, which says,
International President, Custodian of all the archives and records of the TS, December 27, 28, 29, Convention at Adia Headquarters. The political congress held at Allahabad, as well as soreness on the part of the Bombay branch, affect the attendance. Convention abolishes entrance fee and annual dues. This is strongly objected to by both HPB and WQ Judge soon after. Convention adopts policy of reorganizing the TS work on the line of autonomous sections. William Kwan Judge is elected Vice President of the TS. Convention decides that the President of the TS shall be the custodian of all the archives and records of the TS and hold office for a period of 7 years.
So you see, this is a very interesting quote, which says that in 1888, during the convention, they decided that 1889 actually, that each section would be independent, but the international president of the Theosophical Society at the time, Colonel Walcott, would be the custodian of all the archives and all records of the Theosophical Society. And this goes showing the importance that they gave to all this material and how important they considered archives, registers, and we can consider library a form of archive also. All this material to be within the Theosophical Society. Now, regarding the opening of the England headquarters in London, this is a very interesting part of the history of the Theosophical Society, and we can begin with this quote that says,
England opening of the headquarters. At 19 Avenue Road, Regent's Park, NW, on Thursday, July 3rd, 1890, the new meeting room of the Blavatsky Lodge of the Theosophical Society was inaugurated with a crowded meeting, the chair being occupied by Annie Besant, at whose side sat Madame H.P. Blavatsky. Every seat, every inch of standing room was occupied, and a number of late arrivals found themselves compelled to stand outside the windows and follow the proceedings as best they could. In opening the proceedings, Mrs. Besant mentioned that the new room had been erected by voluntary subscriptions in connection with the new headquarters of the Theosophical Society in Europe at 19 Avenue Road, which will shortly be ready for occupation. Referring to the work already accomplished by the Theosophical Society, she emphasized the hope that the hall would become a center of theosophical activity in all directions, a real home for all earnest members of the society, where they will always be sure to find a cordial welcome, sympathetic companionship, and help and advice in their difficulties. After showing the paramount importance of individual exertion in causing the advance of humanity, the speaker referred to the rapidly coming future when the hall, now inaugurated, would be looked back to as the center and starting point of a movement of universal importance.
so this is a very important passage because 19 Road was actually the residence of Annie Besant, the place where Madame Blavatsky was living. The headquarters of the European Theosophical Society was established there in London, and they had the vision that from that city they would create, let's say in Europe and of course around the world, powerful center for theosophy. And in the next quote, we can see that
England opening of the headquarters, Rule 15. The section shall have its today headquarters in London, where a room or rooms shall be provided and furnished as a reading room for the use of members of the section. A library of works on theosophy and occultism shall be formed for their use, and the expenses shall be defrayed out of the funds of the section.
Here we see the importance also that they give to creating a library together with the headquarters of their section. The process of actually forming the headquarters, implementing a space for them to meet was a process that was organized in parallel with the library of works on theosophy and occultism. And the next quote says,
England opening of the headquarters. This headquarters in London, the heart of the British section, ought to be established at once. The only way to do this without a crushing yearly expenditure is to choose a house in a garden where there would be room to build, and then add to it a large room for meetings, and over this, rooms for the accommodation of the staff. The ordinary rent of the house will be covered by the rents paid by those of the staff who are unable to thus contribute to the support of the headquarters. But the cost of building and of maintaining the secretaries ought to fall on the section at large. Contributions to this fund, marked Theosophical Building Fund, may be sent to Annie Besant, 19 Avenue Road, Regent's Park, London, Northwest.
So it is past 2 years that they have been trying to establish headquarters in London. We first read a passage from 1888, and we know we are in 1890, and they are still struggling and trying to create a headquarters for the English Theosophical Society and also for the European Theosophical Society. And they are actively working to raise funds to make that possible. The next passage says,
England opening of the headquarters. A scheme for the establishment of permanent British headquarters in London was laid before the council by Annie Besant and was received with full sympathy, the official sanction of the council being given for its execution as speedily as circumstances may permit. W.R. Auld, General Secretary of the British Section, TS.
Now we see still in 1890, Annie Besant herself officially present a proposal to create a headquarters in London for the Theosophical Society. And the next passage says,
again, England opening of the headquarters, part of a very long report. We are glad to be able to report great progress with our headquarters, for we determined not to await the completion of the necessary sum ere commencing operations. The large room, which will be utilised as a reading room and on Thursdays for the meetings of the Blavatsky Lodge, is finished and now only needs its furniture. For that it will have to wait a little, for we do not intend to run into debt, and all the necessary building must be done before we begin furnishing. In this way, the shelves will be all complete and paid for, and the rest must be done as funds permit. What was the double dining room of the house is now the study and library of H.P. Blavatsky, while the old drawing room is being divided into drawing room and secretary's writing room. In this way, every inch of space is being utilised. Each member of the staff has a private room, though some are rather small, furnished to serve as bedroom and workroom.
So still in 1890, you see that they are doing progress. They have a large room for meetings, but no furniture. So we can imagine that the way they were meeting in an empty room. And they have also these headquarters with limited space for everyone to work. What do you think about it, Juliet?
I think what they were doing was incredible, because to get these people together and to attempt to create a headquarters with no ready money already there, and just hope that the funds would come in, a few pennies and sixpences or £1 at a time, as we saw from the building fund list that was published in Lucifer, is an amazing achievement. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and they might, they might have organized a number of meetings in that empty, large room. So we can only imagine that they were bringing chairs or sitting on the floor or meeting under the most challenging ways, isn't it?
Well, there were times where they had mentioned they were seated on cushions and that someone would require 2 cushions. So it didn't stop them. Personal sacrifice was not an element to stop them. It really wasn't.
Yeah, and it involved a lot of personal sacrifice for them to manage to have a headquarters in London, because at that time, London was already expensive, as we see in the passages that we are, looking at this moment. So it seems that London has been always quite expensive place, even in the 19th century, isn't it?
Which is why they chose and decided to build their own headquarters, as we saw in the previous passage, that it was just too expensive. The rents were just too high. So they had recognized already we have to buy something and build it to our own needs.
So the next quote passage focuses on the formation of the British section.
Formation of the British section, Rule 13 of the British section is stipulated. The section shall have its headquarters in London, where a room or rooms shall be provided and furnished as a reading room for the use of members of the section. A library of works on theosophy and occultism shall be formed for their use, the expenses being defrayed out of the funds of the section.
So you see, they decide, actually, we are going back in past in time because the previous code focused on 1890. Now we are back again on 888. And then we see that they decided during the formation of the British section to establish the headquarters in London. But I think that it's important to emphasize that they decided to establish the headquarters in London, not because London was the capital of England or anything like that, because we have our international headquarters in Adyar, which was established in the South India, not in the capital of India, for example. So I don't think this has nothing to do with London being the capital, but actually London at the time was the space where Annie Besant was living, where Blavatsky was living, and where a number of very influential theosophists were living, and in that way became a natural space to develop theosophical headquarters for the Theosophical Society in England. What are your thoughts, Juliet, on that?
I think what I take from this is that literally on the same level of importance, they always mention the headquarters in London and the creation of a library of works on theosophy and occultism for the use of members and anyone that would want to come and read them and consult them. The two things were always hand in hand, the headquarters and the library, the headquarters and the library. And there was the library fund and the building fund. And the two things were always hand in hand.
Well, my dog agrees with you, one of them.
Good to know.
Anyway, that's a very important point that, of course, we are focusing also on the library. And as we saw in a previous passage, the creation of the headquarters goes hand in hand, as you said, with the formation of the library. It was very important for them to create a library so that members could have access to very important material, not only on theosophy, but on a number of other related topics and subjects. Now, the next quote reads,
England headquarters. In obedience to the almost unanimous voice of the Fellows of the Theosophical Society in Europe, I, H.P. Blavatsky, the originator and co-founder of the Theosophical Society, accept the duty of exercising the presidential authority for the whole of Europe. And in virtue of this authority, I declare that the headquarters of the Theosophical Society in London, where I reside, will in future be the headquarters for the transaction of all official business of the Theosophical Society in Europe.
Yeah, that's a very interesting quote, because when Blavatsky talks about the Theosophical Society in Europe, it's not a different Theosophical Society. It's something like the European Federation we know today. And at the time, Blavatsky was the president of the European Theosophical Society and declared the headquarters of the European Theosophical Society in London. That should be in London and not only in the place where she was living, which was at the 19th Avenue Road. And this gives a very important dimension to London as a theosophical center. As I said before, not because London is a capital, but because we had all these theosophists, all this theosophical movement, which was actually very powerful towards the end of the 19th century, taking place in London. So the next passage says,
the TSE Library. Countess Constant Wachtmeister, being the secretary for the Western section of the Theosophical Society, and receiving many letters from people who deplore their inability to purchase theosophical literature, has deemed it advisable to form a circulating library, which will contain not only theosophical books, but also works of any kind which would tend to elevate, educate, or develop the mind, and thus prepare it for the reception of theosophical teachings. As this is a somewhat serious undertaking, she takes this opportunity of making an earnest appeal for contributions of money in support of this work, and also for donations of suitable books, feeling sure that this lending library will commend itself to the cordial support of all theosophists and lovers of truth. All replies should be addressed to her at 7 Duke Street, Adelphi, WC. Lending Library of the TPS. The Lending Library of the TPS will be opened to the members and public on the 1st of October. The charge will be 2d per week for each volume. All inquiries should be addressed to TPS Library, 7 Duke Street, Adelphi, WC. Country readers will be charged postage. Donations of books or funds for their purchase will be thankfully received.
Well, the 7 Duke Street, Adelphi, was actually, I believe, the residence of the Countess Wachtmeister. And then we see that in 88, volume 2, number 7, the 7th volume of the Lucifer collection, there is a call to create this lending library in England. And then we see in volume 3 also another call, and they plan to actually make the official opening of the library when, Juliet, 11th of October?
On the 1st of October.
The 1st of October. So they had of the same year. So the idea, as you see, it was very, very important for them to form this theosophical library in London, in parallel to the headquarters. What do you think about it, Juliet?
Well, I think going through Lucifer magazine, it was very obvious and apparent how much Countess Constant Wachtmeister was invested in finding books and collecting books and forming this library. It was something very close to her heart because it was close to Blavatsky's heart. And she just carried it forward, and she carried the banner for this library. And it was apparent through so many articles and notices to please donate books, we'll pay for carriage for the books, having them actually at her house until they had a more suitable place for them. I mean, what can be more personal and more passionate than housing things in your own home?
Yes, I agree with you. And still on the library of the British section, we have this passage.
The TSE Library, the section library. It was one of the wishes of HPB that the library at headquarters should grow into one of the best libraries on occult and theosophical subjects in Europe. We are far from such a consummation at present. The nucleus of a library taken over by the British section from the London Lodge and from the British by the European section has been increased by the books left by HPB, it is true. But these books are, except in a few instances, in themselves of no value. They're valuable to us because they are her books. But for the most part, they consist of volumes sent for review to Lucifer. Books are no good unless they are used, and there must be a number of members of the society who have books on theosophy and occultism and general works bearing indirectly on these subjects that they never use and are never likely to use. Such books will be of more value on the shelves of our library and will often save the time spent by members in journeying to the British Museum or other libraries, and also be the means of supplying readier answers to questions which rain in on all sides. Fellows of the TS, please overhaul your books. The library will pay carriage if necessary. Walter R. Old, librarian.
You know, this is a very interesting quote, because then we see the vision they had for the library at the time. We see that Blavatsky envisioned the British, the library in London becoming one of the largest library on occult and theosophical subjects in Europe. So they were envisioning, actually, and they had a very large project to the library. And we see that's very interesting also, that the library begins somehow or grows somehow with HPB's personal books, including all the books that she was receiving and reviewing to magazine Lucifer. We actually have a volume of in the Lucifer collection entitled What is in a Book, presenting all book reviews published by Madame during the years of Madame Blavatsky in Lucifer magazine. And it is also interesting to point out that the librarian, he is asking for people to donate their books so that they can create this library, which they want to be at their headquarters. They do not want the library, Theosophical Library, to be at the British Library or to be elsewhere. They want it at the headquarters, so it will go hand into hand with the meetings, would allow the members to access this material, and it emphasizes the importance that they give to this material, also to books and publications. My mom actually said that a house without books is a house without a soul. So
very true.
Yeah. And Juliet, before passing over to you, I just want to say that you see, actually, when he says that we will pay carriage if necessary, they were actually literally paying a carriage with a horse to go to pick up the book and to bring to them. So they begin from zero, trying to create this library for the headquarters of the British section and for the European Theosophical Society, isn't it, Juliet?
Yeah, but it's very, very true. But what I find very moving is when he writes that we have the books left by HPB, and while they are not of any monetary value, he says they're not, apart from a few instances where they were worth something of monetary value, they're valuable to us because they are her books. But even having compiled the hundreds of reviews that are in What's in a Book volume, just to think that those books had passed through her hands on her desk, that she had read them and looked through them and made comments on them, is priceless. And I find it very, very moving, because it's such a personal gesture and something that is, it's priceless, absolutely priceless. And I love this piece of writing, this quote here, I really do. It's, as you said, it's the heart of the library, it really is.
So, and then the next passage is still focusing on the library, says,
The TS Library, the section library. W.R. Auld, the librarian, desires to acknowledge with many thanks the receipt of books for the headquarters library from Mrs. E. Wilkinson, H.T. Edge, and E.S. If members will kindly look over their libraries and send to him any books for which they have no further use, they will be doing a practical good. It is of no consequence that the books are not theosophical, or that they are out of repair, for a use can be found for them. The librarian will be glad to pay the carriage of any packages sent to him. Walter R. Auld, librarian. Dr. Roviralta has presented to the library at the London headquarters a most valuable work. It is an interleaved copy of Ragon's Cours philosophique, crammed full of the author's notes in his own handwriting. Ragon was the wisest of all the writers on masonry, and also a profound student of occultism, and was held in much esteem by HPB, who quoted him extensively. If the notes are sufficiently valuable, they may shortly see the day in the pages of Lucifer. Headquarters Library. The library has been thoroughly rearranged and recatalogued by Miss Helen Fagg, who has kindly presented the headquarters with a life-size portrait of HPB taken from a photograph. The Countess Wachtmeister has completed the furnishing of the adjoining conservatory, which is now heated, and gives space for the visitors at the informal Tuesday at homes and for readers. Mrs. Besant has presented the library with a new bookcase.
So you see, it's so interesting, because they were publishing, actually acknowledging the donation of books, and even acknowledging now that they had heating in the room. Which room they mentioned that there, Juliet?
The library has been rearranged in the conservatory, the adjoining conservatory.
So you see, there were so many details that they were at the time really struggling to organize the headquarters, from furniture to the space itself, to the library, to the heating system and all that. So that you see that they begin literally from zero, trying to construct this library, trying to create this space in London with so many challenges that we can only wonder how much they managed to achieve in such a short space of time, isn't it?
It's incredible. And the fact that they were using their own money, as very often we do too, to dip into our own pockets for a cause that we believe in. When it says Mrs. Besant has presented the library with a new bookcase, I understand that to mean that she purchased the bookcase herself and gave it to the library and donated it to the library. I mean, it's
all of them. They contributed with some donations, with some membership fees, with some pennies they managed to get from here and there, and also giving what they had or what they could give to construct all that. And the next quote reads:
the TSE Library. The Countess Wachtmeister has given another proof of her unflagging energy by inaugurating a public reading room for theosophical literature. The premises are the old British section rooms at Duke Street, which are still unoccupied. The idea is to make this the headquarters of the TPS Lending Library and to throw it open for the use of the public at a small charge. It is intended to open the library on October 1st, and we hope to be able to give fuller details in our next issue. We are also informed that a new branch of the TS is being formed and that it will hold its meetings at the same address. The section library had been increased by the completion of its series of The Sacred Books of the East and by the whole of Trubner's Oriental series, some 50 volumes, not to mention smaller editions, which brings the total number up to about 1,400, a number to which another cipher might well be added. Point 1, that £150 per annum be employed from the funds of the section for procuring additional help in the General Secretary's office and the library. And point 2, that an additional room at number 17 Avenue Road be taken for the enlargement of the section library.
Yeah, that you see, it's so interesting because the library and the headquarters for them were one thing.
Yeah.
It was one thing. They couldn't separate, so they had the funding to maintain the building and the funding to maintain the library, and both were very important parts of the process of the process of creating this space in London, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's very, very apparent.
So, and the next passage reads,
European section, TSE England. At the afternoon sitting, the proceedings commenced with the unveiling of the splendid casket containing some of the ashes of H.P. Blavatsky. The valuable and beautiful gift of our brother, Sven Bengtsson of Lund, Sweden, who had put into his work all his love and all his skill. The convention stood up as the casket was unveiled by the president-elect, who stated that the ashes had been placed in it in the presence of witnesses, and that the following paper had been enclosed with it. We, the undersigned, do hereby certify, each for himself, that on the 15th day of July, 1892, at 19 Avenue Road, in the City of London, in the front room called HPB's room, we witnessed the placing of the ashes of H.P. Blavatsky within this vase or receptacle made by Herr Sven Bengtsson from designs by R. Marchal, and the said ashes being in their turn within a copper Indian vase. To all of which this shall be testimony. Constant Wachtmeister, Annie Besant, William Q. Judge, Isabel Cooper Oakley, Walter R. Old, Alice L. Cleather, G. R. S. Mead, Laura M. Cooper, and Edward T. Sturdy. The casket is in the form of an Indian dagoba standing on a plateau about 2 feet square, crowned with a lotus flower enclosing a heart of flame. Symbols such as the Tau, the interlaced triangles, and others familiar to every theosophist are introduced into the work. The motto of the TS in Sanskrit running around the base of the dome. The General Secretary was instructed to send a telegram of thanks to Brother Bengtsson, and the following resolution was passed by acclamation. Resolved, that this convention tender its warmest thanks to Brother Sven Bengtsson of Lund, Sweden, for his beautiful and valuable gift of a casket to contain the ashes of the body of HPB. A gift valuable indeed for the labour and skill lavished on it, and for its artistic and intrinsic worth, but valuable chiefly for the love and reverence for our great teacher, wrought into it from our brother's heart.
You see, this passage is not directly related to the process of the formation of the London headquarters and the library itself, but it shows the reason why, one of the reasons why London, for theosophists around the world, acquires a very special meaning in terms of space, because it was the place where Blavatsky spent the last years of her life. It was the place where Blavatsky passed away and was cremated. So very much like in India, we have the international headquarters and Chennai, where Colonel Walcott and many international presidents, they have lived and they have died. And this is such an important historical places for theosophists worldwide. London becomes also very important because it is the space where Blavatsky dedicated the last years of her life to create, to organize headquarters. It's the city where she actually finishes writing, not finished, she goes on writing the secret doctrine. And what do you think about it, Juliet?
I find this piece very, very moving. And I think that for any theosophist, quite honestly, the connection to London is, it goes on par with Blavatsky. That's where she was, that's where she was writing, it's where she was living, it's where she overcame close calls with death. So much happened there. You can just see her receiving people. I think that we were particularly blessed having gone through all of Lucifer magazine. We saw everything on a day-to-day basis, which other people have not seen, of just how active they were and how important being in London was for them. And it's very, very moving, very moving.
Yeah, so yeah. And then we have the next passage, which is very enlightening. And we have selected it specifically because it shows the great challenges they were going through to be able to create what they have created. And it says,
yeah, I love the adventures of the van. Alongside of road, Pentonville, 6:30 p.m. This far, without injury, at least to the physical, the moral nature a little shattered by winged words addressed to the horse, on Pentonville Hill, our quadruped jibbed. But with the help of half the East End pushing behind, we have at last reached the other side, where we are stationed before a public house, giving the horse a feed that it doesn't deserve. We have next to make a straight cut to London Bridge. The bridge is our only way of crossing the river. I think we shall have the wages of going on and not to sleep tonight, unless we can find a backyard in which to put the van. 9:30. After beating about under a heavy press of canvas for 3 hours, we have at last, with much difficulty, anchored in a backyard. The great unwashed who follow us to the bitter end have stabled and fed our horse and placed our van so that we can get out in the morning. Wednesday. At every hill we have to wait until a wagoner comes along with a good horse and we hook on behind. This is a rather tedious process and costs a shilling every time. Friday. Yesterday we did nearly 13 miles. We had to be pulled up 4 hills, having to wait nearly 3 hours at the foot of one in Dartford before we could find a wagoner who had a suitable horse. The hills are getting worse and worse, and our horse is showing himself not equal to the job. We have been considering and find that in the long run, a good strong draft horse that would take us uphill and down dale at the rate of 30 miles a day would be cheaper in the long run than our present animal, with which we cannot do more than 10 miles a day.
Well, that's the adventures of the man. I think that it goes on around 10 pages.
It's about 10 pages.
Yeah, and it's amazing the way that they were working. They had a horse who was doing 10 miles a day, plus the struggles every time that the horse needed to go up a road. I mean, they had, Juliet.
They would get out and walk beside the carriage because the horse couldn't carry the weight of the carriage, couldn't pull the weight of the carriage with them inside it. So even in the rain, they had to get out with their long skirts and whatever and trudge behind, sometimes even pushing the carriage. I mean, it makes for fascinating reading to see the lengths that these people would go, especially the ladies, to be out sleeping in backyards and under canvas, which would take 3 hours to battle against this piece of canvas to protect them from the elements. Fascinating stuff, absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and they were doing that to collect books, to promote theosophical ideas, to share brochures, pamphlets, and they were working under very difficult conditions. And all these were volunteers. They were volunteers working because they believed in the cause, and they were really self-sacrificing and dedicating themselves. Again, they had nothing at the time. They did not have an infrastructure. They did not have money. They started everything from zero. And then you see how they work so hard to achieve what they have achieved, isn't it?
Incredible.
Yeah. So, and the next quote says,
Adelphi Lodge. A charter of incorporation was issued to the Adelphi Lodge on Friday, 20th November, 1891. The officers of the lodge are John M. Watkins, President, P. W. Bullock, Vice President, and R. E. Shaw, Honorary Secretary. The lodge has been formed to supply the want of an organization for the study of theosophy in central London. The members meet at the Reading Room, 7 Duke Street, Adelphi, London, WC, every Monday evening at 8 p.m. The regular meetings are alternately private and open to visitors. Those on the first and third Mondays in the month are reserved for private study, while visitors are invited to attend the meetings on the second and fourth Mondays.
And that's about it. That's the material that we wanted to share and discuss. That's I think that we could do it with other sections also, Juliet, isn't it?
Almost definitely, yes.
Yeah, because it's very, very interesting to look how they were working, how they were trying to create from nothing whatever they have created. However, in the case of London, it assumes a special meaning and significance because, as we said, was the place where Blavatsky, Annie Besant, and many other very influential theosophical personalities lived and tried to create a very special place, imagining and envisioning the Theosophical Society in that city becoming a very powerful spiritual center and place, and also having the largest library on occult and esoteric subjects. So it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very true, because of course, while this buzz is going on in London and in England, of course, all around Europe, but as far afield as New Zealand and Australia, they were opening new TS lodges and centres, and libraries also there on the same format. And books were being sent even from there. People were travelling down by steamer to go and give talks and tour down there to assist. The lengths that the early Theosophists went through is remarkable. It really is remarkable. And the excitement about everything was what just gave them the passion to move forward.
Yeah, and then we have also this work, that we were doing with the Friends of Theosophical Archives, which was an idea put forward by Leslie Price on the needs of to raise awareness on the importance of preserving the archives, Theosophical archives, preserving libraries, actually training members on how to preserve this material, how to create an inventory of all this material, on how both archives and the library hold very important information, the material regarding the history of the Theosophical Society itself. And this is such an important aspect of the work of the Theosophical Society, as we saw from the very beginning, that they chose that the international president of the Theosophical Society, DR, would be the person then responsible for all this material, even though the sections they were considered independent as early as 1888. So thank you so much, Juliet, for sharing this time with us here today. And would you like to say some words before we close?
I think all I can say is that I really recommend people, Theosophists, anyone interested, to buy the What's the Buzz volume and to read through some of the things that they went through on a day-to-day basis from the beginning, from the very early days, because it's like opening an old photo album where you see the children when they're very, very small, then you see them progressing until they become grandmothers themselves. And I think it's important to reach back to those early roots. And perhaps there we'll also find renewed passion and interest and the excitement of dedicated service to our own TS lodges and everything else. But certainly it's of vital importance to maintain our libraries and our archives and our books. We keep discovering new pieces of writing that were not new. We find things that we bring back into the light, let's say, which is what we're doing at the European School of Theosophy with publishing these things.
Yes, and then you see that this actually is part of our legacy as Theosophists. If you imagine the library, the archives, and such spaces. So it's good if everyone, we can do everything that we can to preserve all that, isn't it?
Yeah, we need to safeguard them, definitely. Otherwise, they'll just be lost or disbanded or ruined. The things need to be saved. They need to be saved. And you can't go out and buy them. You can't order them from Amazon and buy a new one when they're gone. Not at all.
No, you cannot. And I think that's about it. So thank you so much, Juliet.
Thank you, Erica, for putting this all together.
We move forward, remembering everyone, especially Theosophists, of the importance of this legacy that we have in libraries, in archives, and in the spaces that themselves.
And not to throw away the old Theosophical volumes. We can always find a home for them. So definitely.
If you don't want them, you can always send them to Greece, where maybe.
Definitely. Never throw away your old books. We'll definitely find somewhere for them. Yeah. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Pointing out, that's very interesting that they even mention the British Library, and they say, look, we don't want the books or the library to go to another institution.
Yeah.
We don't want the library to be hosted in a non-theosophical institution. We want the library to be in our theosophical space so that the members, they can access it whenever they wish.
That's an important point. That's an important point.
Okay, so wish you all a nice week. Thank you so much again, and we close our meeting now. Thank you, Juliet. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.